Welcome, all you friends and neighbors, citizens of the world, sisters and brothers, family, friends. I'm Michael James. I'm here in Chicago bringing you the Thanksgiving weekend edition of the Live from the Heartland show. And this would be number 128 during the time of the pandemic. It is for the week of November 26, 2022, and we are recording it the day before Thanksgiving on November 23rd. Our home base is WLUW. .org, 88.7 FM here in Chicago. You can get us anywhere in the world at youtube.com/heartlandmedia/videos. And we're on podcasts with Spotify and Google, as well as on CAN TV. So today we've got three guests. We're going to have our old friend Mike Klonksy coming on, talking about all kinds of things. We're going to have Bobby Wilson, the son of the great soul singer Jackie Wilson, is coming on. He's going to be coming to Chicago. And we're going to have Erik Graff coming on from Heirloom Books here in Edgewater near Rogers Park, talking about Heirloom Bookstore. So one of the good things that happened to me this week, and I would share it because I don't know if you can find it, but I was watching PBS on Tuesday night, and they had a great show on Buffy St. Marie. A native woman out of Canada who hit it big, ended up doing stuff on Sesame Street, doing a lot of other things, always an activist, a really great person, and I was glad to learn a lot of things about her. Another good thing that happened to me is I got a new book. It's called In the Time of the Panthers, and it's by Jeffrey Henson Scales, who is a photographer. He shot these pictures when he was a young fellow. Grew up in Berkeley, and now he is a photo editor for the New York Times. It's a beautiful book with early pictures of the inspirational Black Panther Party in Oakland and Berkeley. A not so good thing, and there was more of it this morning or last night perhaps, were the number of rash of killings around the country. This one happened in Virginia, 6 people dead. That's on top of a few days ago, Colorado with 4 dead, and I believe there was also a shooting in Oklahoma on a marijuana plantation or farm where some Chinese workers were killed by another worker, I believe. I'm not sure of the details, but I heard that on the news. So there are a lot of bad things still going on, including Iran, where people are still in the streets protesting the right-wing religious regime over there. We have starvation conditions in Northern Africa, and we have an ongoing war in the Ukraine. We're going to talk a little bit more about some of those things with one of our guests, Mike Klonksy, in a little bit. I also want to note that Nancy Pelosi is retiring. I want to thank her. It wasn't always that I rooted for the Democrats as I do now, but I certainly have been very grateful to her and a lot of moves that she's made. Very strong, powerful woman, quite a legacy to follow. And I hope that she continues to do good in the world. And we hope that her husband, who was beaten up not too long ago in a home invasion after Nancy, he is still recuperating. On voting in those things, we've had a lot of it, but here in Chicago, we have to stay ready because we have another election in February to determine our mayoral candidate. Actually, not to determine the candidate, but see who wins or goes to a runoff, as well as alder people. Last week, in case you missed it, you can get it at youtube.com/heartlandmedia/videos or at those podcasts, Live from the Heartland podcast on what's it called? It's called Spotify and Google. And we had David Orr, former Cook County clerk, a good friend and neighbor. He talked a little bit about the recent elections and the Board of Review. He pointed out that under Fritz Cahey, homeowners were expecting lower taxes, but the Board of Review reversed the decision, keeping probably taxes on homes up there and lowering the rate that Cahey had put on places like the Trump Tower. Also on the show last week was Alderwoman Haddon, who talked about the mayor's role in keeping her one vote short of a quorum to talk about the transfer tax and using some of that money to help with the homeless. I want you all to take note. I just saw this that in Georgia, where we await the election runoff, their Supreme Court has just reinstated the 6-week abortion ban, one of the toughest, most restrictive in the nation. And on the sports front, some of you may be watching the World Cup. A lot of upsets. This time, most recently, as we record this for Saturday's show, Japan has stunned Germany. They beat them 2-1. Another upset. Or one thing to note about that game, though, the German players protested against a ban on an armband supporting LGBTQ rights. The U.S. and Wales tied in the game, and Argentina lost to Saudi Arabia. Last Friday night, I went with some family and friends to the Bulls game, and they played the lowest team in the league, Orlando. They were way behind. They came back. It was great in the fourth quarter, and then they lost. They were up by 4 with 15 seconds, and they lost the game. That's too bad. They went on, though, the next game to beat Boston, a much better team, who had an 8-game winning streak. I've been starting to go to the date of the show and history. And on this day, which will be the 26th of November, gay rights activist Harvey Milk, who was the first openly gay elected official in U.S. history, was assassinated in San Francisco. Harvey Milk was the mayor, or I think he was the mayor. Anyhow, he was killed by a guy named Dan White. Let me see. Another thing is Sojourner Truth, the African-American evangelist and reformer who applied her religious fervor to the abolitionist and women's rights movement, died in 1883. But this was, I don't know, I guess that's the day she died. And on a happier note, Tina Turner, a great singer, was born in 1939 in Nutbush, Tennessee. On a sad note, our friend, longtime activist, Stoughton Lind, who was 92 years old, has passed away. And I believe that we will talk about that with our first guest. So we're going to take a short musical break. Hal James, our engineer, and also my son, is picking the music today. And we'll be right back with our first guest, who is the one and only Mike Klonksy. I'm Michael James, and our next guest is someone I met way back in probably 67, Joe Blum and Terry Cannon, who were two different editors of the Movement newspaper. We went on a little tour around America. We left, I flew out to the West Coast, and we drove down to California, and we went to the SDS office, and we met this fellow named Mike Klonksy. And I did a lot of stuff with Mike over the years. He was a national officer of SDS. We were on the National Interim Committee together. But we grew to love each other, I think, at least like each other a lot when we went to the old Soviet Union with Athletes United for Peace and played baseball both in Russia and in the Ukraine. And I asked him to come on today because he has a new blog out. He has a radio show on our sister station, Lumpen Radio 105.5. And he's got a lot of information. So good morning to you, comrade, brother Mike.
Hey, brother. Thanks for the plug, too, man. I remember it very well, like it was yesterday, where you guys came through L.A. and kind of shook things up over there.
Well, it's been a long haul we've all been on. And one of the people that we both knew and respected was Stoughton Lind. And he just passed away at 92, a longtime peace, labor, progressive activist. Do you want to share a few thoughts on Stoughton?
Well, there's so much to say about Stoughton. There's been some good obituaries written. People should look at the New York Times obit. That was great. To me, Stoughton was a hero of mine. And the thing I remember most about him was his leadership in building the freedom schools in Mississippi. And as an educator, that really inspired me to to get into education and do the work that that I've been doing over the last 30 or 40 years.
That's well, rest in peace, comrade brother. It won't be long till we see you up there or wherever it is, where all the comrade brothers and sisters, et cetera, go to hang out for the.
We'll have a Nick meeting or something like that. A Nick or Nick meeting. Yeah.
Tell us a little briefly about your show on Lumpen Radio.
Well, we've had the show about 5 years now. It started with my brother and I. We were sitting in a bar one night, and with a bunch of people, and my brother and I were just doing some chit chat back and forth about politics. And somebody who worked over at Lumpen Radio said, "Hey, you guys really should do this on the air. People would like it." And so we said, "Okay, we'll give it a try." And so we started doing this show an hour every Friday. And then when COVID came and hit the when it was at its peak, we put the show on hiatus. It was actually on hiatus for 2 years.
Yeah, I kept looking for it.
Yeah, well, we didn't feel good about coming into the studio,
right,
and bringing guests in there, and we didn't really like doing it over Zoom, to tell you the honest truth. But so about 6 months ago, I got back in the studio myself, and then with my wife Susan and some other friends, we started up Hitting Left with Mike Klonksy and friends, and we've been doing that every week, and it's been great.
It's a good show. I like to listen to it when I can, and then later on Fridays we listen to Rag Radio with Thorne Dreyer. So there's a lot of progressive radio these days.
Well, here's the thing, Mike. One thing when you're talking about our history, you and my history, one of the things that both of us have always valued was developing the alternative media, whether it be in print or over the air. And I think it's really great that you and I are both having these experiences at our age, learning new stuff, how to do it, and building up the movement around the media.
Yeah, and it's good. And people now, they don't have to tune in at the time. At least on our show, they can listen. They can anytime they want with the YouTube stuff. Well, you're putting out a newsletter pretty regularly. You may want to share some information on that. But one of the things that you put in it most recently, maybe this morning or last night, was Trump's former Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, one of the biggest MAGA neo-fascists around. Talk to us a little bit about him and what you got on him.
Well, I think he's decided to run for president.
Great.
Yeah, and he came here to Chicago and gave a talk last week. He actually talked to a bunch of veterans, Navy SEAL veterans, and they have a foundation, and he was there raising money for it. Anyway, one of the things he gave in the speech was his enemies list. He gave a list of who the most dangerous people in the world are, and who his number one targets were. And he started out with China. He said that China's the number one main danger, and he started his war rhetoric. He's a cold warrior of the new type. And then second on his list was the teachers unions. He said, so there's China and the teachers union, and among those, the teachers union is the most dangerous. And he singled out AFT President Randy Weingarten in particular. So I wrote a little piece about that today, and I said I was feeling depressed that Randy Weingarten made the number one spot and I didn't. And so I said, well, I'm just going to have to redouble my efforts in the next year so that I get on. And it reminded me so much of Nixon. You and I go back to the day when Nixon had his enemies list, and we were both trying to get on it.
Well, we used to be on the House Internal Securities, and the Senate had something that I know because I was an SDS National Interim Committee guy, kind of the steering committee or whatever it was. You were actually National Secretary, but we were on a couple of lists back in our youth.
Well, I still have a copy of that. They made a chart, like a flow chart, and they had, like the national secretary, they had Bernadine Doran and myself and some other, and then they had you and the Nick group, and then they had rank and file people that they had listed as, in order of who's most dangerous. And of course, the real most dangerous people to them were people like Fred Hampton and leadership of the Panther Party and Malcolm X, and people who they went on to set up for assassination. So you and I were lucky we were on that list, but we're still here.
Well, I bet you Pompeo does not get the nomination for the Republicans, and who knows who will. That's I don't want to talk about that too much because I'm a little talked out and we got other things. Let's shift to the Ukraine. I got to confess that as much as I understand that the Ukraine and Russia and both were formidable members of the old USSR, they've been kind of going at each other in all kind of ways. And, I tend to fall into rooting for the Ukraine forces to defeat Russia. Russia's the bad guy. But sometimes you put a better spin or different spin on it. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about how you see the Ukraine and where you think it's going?
Well, first of all, it's called Ukraine now, not the Ukraine.
I apologize for that.
Meaning, well, the only significance of that is that it's its own country, and it's not a part of the old Soviet Union, which back in those days, many people called that the prison house of nations. And so as for me, and I think for you too, we've always long supported the right of self-determination for all nations. And back in February, the Russia, which is no longer the Soviet Union collapsed, of course. And now under Putin's leadership, it's become just a kind of a totalitarian, aggressive state. And one of the things it's trying to do is, by force, is reestablish itself as the ruler of all these, reconstruct the former federation of Soviet states. There was always that tendency, even when it was the Soviet Union. You can look at the invasion of Czechoslovakia in '68, while you and I were out in the streets at the Democratic Convention. Russian tanks were pulling into Prague, and it kind of awakened me in my understanding of the world situation, to understand that there was this system of imperialism, which meant rivalry between big powers and leading to war, inevitably leading to war. So anyway, to make a long story short about this horrible war in Ukraine, the Russians invaded. And at first, the fighting was a product of a war of resistance against the invasion, by the Ukrainian people against the Russian invaders. But after a few months, I began to realize that what had happened is that had morphed into a proxy war. In other words, like a lot of wars, national liberation wars and other civil wars, the big powers took advantage of it to try to make gains in the region. And so NATO and the U.S. Got into it. And the U.S. Started sending billions of dollars in weaponry and began trying to escalate the war and to strike a blow at Putin, basically weaken him. And for the last couple of months, we've had this unwinnable proxy war going on, between the U.S. and NATO forces on the one hand and Russia on the other. And it's been devastating to Ukraine, and hundreds of thousands of people killed, millions had to leave the country, and now the country's been devastated. And so my position is, and not just me, but others globally are calling for a negotiated peace. And like we've always done in terms of war, we're against war. For us, those of us who are educators and teachers, war is the worst thing for kids and schools and children. And, there's going to have to be some kind of a negotiated agreement. Like wars always, with wars always end in some kind of negotiation. And for us, the continuation of this war has meant global food crisis in Africa and other places, economic disaster, causing rising inflation, things like that. So I don't want to go on too much longer, but I say we got to end this thing, and we got to rebuild a war movement here in this country. We haven't had, the war movement has dissipated. The left now in the United States doesn't even talk about war anymore. And so we don't want to study war no more, Michael. We want to end this thing and put pressure on Biden administration to stop, stop throwing more missiles and tanks and things into the war zone, and instead try to push for a negotiated settlement.
Well, I hope we're getting closer over there. It really does seem to me that the Russians under Putin really misjudged the situation a little bit. I know there was a report on NPR this morning about 100,000 plus Russians have left Russia and are in Georgia now because of the Russians' draft policy and conscription and trying to get more troops. It's true that the NATO forces, the U.S., et cetera, have really pumped a lot of military stuff in there. But I also think that we've got a situation where Putin is just, he's not a good guy. Anyhow, that's all. That's all I'm going to say. Yeah. Let's switch over to close to home. And we just had an election. But we here in Chicago are fortunate enough to have another one coming, and that'll be in February, where we select our alder people and our new mayor, or our current mayor. And so what's your take on it? I know that you've had good ties with the teachers union who supported Chewy in the past. You have a wonderful daughter who works in public relations and has done work with the mayor. What's your take on where it's going and the future for all of us in Chicago, as well as who might be elected from the progressive side?
Well, that's a good question. I have no idea.
That's why I asked it. I just wanted to confuse you.
Right. What I was very concerned with, and I wrote a piece about this in my Substack newsletter, and people can read it. I would hope they do. And I was pointing out that the last mayoral election in 2019 tore the left apart in the progressive movement. I mean, it tore it up in 6 ways from Sunday, and it's never recovered since then. It split over support for well, there was again just like this election, there was like 10 candidates running. 8 of them considered themselves progressives. It ended up in a runoff between Tony Preckwinkle, the chair of the Cook County Democratic Party, and Lori Lightfoot. So you had 2 African American women running, and the CTU, the Chicago Teachers Union, and many of the left groups supported Preckwinkle, and others supported Lightfoot. So it kind of split. It split the movement apart, and of course, Lightfoot ended up winning, with in a landslide vote. She took all 50 wards, and Preckwinkle went back to being the president of the Cook County board. Anyway, this election, you got another long list of progressives. Everybody, except maybe Paul Vallis, considers himself a progressive. And Paul Vallis, by the way, was at that meeting I talked about where Pompeo spoke, and Vallis was there cheering on Pompeo,
Oh, wow.
And so Vallis, in the current race, Vallis occupies the right wing of the list of candidates. And then in the middle and the center and the left, you have a whole group of people, including Chewy, our friend Chewy Garcia, who's also a state representative.
Congressman now. Kind of a little kingmaker these days.
Well, it's interesting about about Chewy. I love Chewy, by the way, and we worked together back in the Harold Washington days. Excuse me, Mike. I'm talking too fast and making my as usual. Chewy and a group of other Congress people. This is kind of a segue from our previous discussion about the war. They wrote a letter urging President Biden to negotiate to work towards a rapid settlement of the war. And when the leaders of the party saw this letter, they came down heavy on Chewy and the squad, and they said, pull that letter back, and they did. And I was very disappointed to see them fold like that. But anyway, Chewy decided that he was going to run for mayor. You got Brandon Johnson, who's from the CTU, who's running for mayor. So you have a Latino Black divide there. You got Lightfoot, Mayor Lightfoot, who I think has done, considering the crisis that she, took on by becoming the mayor. And I asked her on our radio show 4 years ago, why would you want to be mayor? And, given, the terrible economic situation of the city, and I thought it was kind of unmanageable from the top. But she said, I think I can do something. So people bought that. She was anti-machine. And at that time, Eddie Burke and these people were all getting indicted. And Madigan was, Boss Madigan was in trouble. And the union had always been tied to Madigan and the leadership of the Democratic Party. So we supported Lori Lightfoot back then. I've been holding off this time on endorsing anybody. First of all, it's not my role to do that, but I've been more of an observer, but, waiting to see who was going to enter the race. And now, now that Chewy's in the race, some people are dropping out. I don't know, others might join in. I don't know why Chewy wants to run for mayor. I think we need him in Congress, to tell you the truth.
Well, I would have loved him to stay in Congress, but he is running, and so he is like an attractive candidate. I wanted to root for Lori in a lot of ways. We had her on our radio show. She's had a rough go of it in a lot of ways. And as your brother put it one time, she had the ability to piss off not only the police department, but also the teachers union at the same time. We're going to run out of time, so we're going to have to continue our discussion about mayoral candidates over the weeks to come. But I want to throw at you one last thing and keep it a little brief, because Hal is texting us about timing with all the guests. You pointed out to me in an email that the Reverend Barber, from the Poor People's Campaign, has sent a pastoral letter to the Democratic Party. You want to make a few comments on that?
Well, following the midterms, the Democrats were dancing in the streets. I mean, they were expecting a red tide to crush the Democrats. Instead, Democrats did pretty well. They lost the House, but they kept the Senate, which is big. But Reverend Barber, who's one of my heroes too, he's the leader of the Poor People's Campaign and real force down in North Carolina. He wrote a letter to the party this week saying, "Okay, stop the celebrating. There's a lot of work that we have to do, and we have to pass, voter voting rights and all these other things before the Republicans take over. And we've only got a few months to do that." And he's telling the Democrats, "Hey, stop celebrating and get busy. We were saved for the moment, but they're not going away. No,
it's clear. The Republicans are, even though we got them, we got the Senate, we got the presidency. We don't have the House. There could be defectors, but our work is cut out for us for the rest of our lives. There's no way around it.
So whatever we think about that, whatever we think about all these other issues, we've got to unite and defeat these fascists. Because they're coming for us, Michael. And we've been through this before. We know what that means. We know what repression. We know what lynching looks like, and we don't want to go back to those days.
Yeah, we got plenty of issues right in front of us. All these killings, gun issues. We'll be talking more, Mike. I love having you on, and I'm really appreciative that you came on this morning, and I'll look forward to seeing you in the not too far off.
Love you, brother. Take care.
Love you. Okay. You are listening to Live from the Heartland. We are recording this via Zoom on the 23rd of November. It will be broadcast for the week of the 26th, and we will be right back with, and we are really glad to be coming back with our next guest, who is Bobby Wilson. I'll put it out there. He is the son of Jackie Wilson, and he is an incomparable, one hell of a performer himself. We'll be right back with Bobby Wilson here on the left end of your dial, WLUW 88.7. Hey, I'm Michael James here with Live from the Heartland. We're out of Chicago, and we're glad you're tuned in or viewing us, however it may be. And I'm very much honored now to bring on our next guest, someone I'm just learning a little bit about, but I certainly knew a little bit about his father, and that would be Bobby Wilson. Bobby's an entertainer. He's the son of the legendary R&B soul singer, Jackie Wilson. He's got a lot of talents of his own, as well as kind of carrying on the legacy of his dad. And he's got a film coming out. There's a lot going on, and he's coming to Chicago, which is why we brought him in. Good morning to you, Bobby.
Good morning. But the most important thing is I am a recording artist.
You are a recording artist.
Yes, that's the most important.
And you are one hell of a recording artist.
Thank you, sir. How are you?
You got a new album out. Tell us all about it.
I got a new song out. I luckily, thanks to a music business, you can record almost anything you want to. And I was a Chicago-based label reached out to me called DJ International Records out of Chicago. They are a house music label. And during the pandemic, they asked me to do a couple of songs. And long story short, I wrote the songs, was produced by my entertainment manager, which is a guy named Myron Bernard. You can look him up. And we released these two songs. One of them is called Are You Ready? The other song is called Stand Up for Love. And both were written during the pandemic. So my first album was done in Nashville on our label Plateau Music. And the name of that album is It's About Time. On that album, I did 6 covers of my dad. Your Love Is Lifting Me Higher, To Be Loved, Call My Name, It Only Happens, to name a few, and Lonely Teardrops, and then some originals, and the title cut, It's About Time, I wrote that too. On that album, I got 4 top 10 records in adult AC, and I was on the ballot for the Grammys for 4 years in a row. So I'm moving.
You are. You're doing good.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Well, your dad was from Detroit. You were born in Long Island, as we discovered, right across. I lived in Connecticut, so we were close.
I didn't know that.
I don't know how old you are. I'm probably a lot older than you, but
probably.
what was it like growing up with a really famous dad?
See, this is where it got hairy for me. I didn't know my dad. My mom gave me up at birth, and I was raised in a foster home. That's why they traveled to South Carolina and dropped me off. When my birth mother dropped me off in South Carolina, the state of South Carolina took me home, gave me the name Bobby Brooks, and I grew up as Bobby Brooks. Joined the Navy. I changed my name legally to Robert Brooks because I got married, and I wanted my son to have a legal name, and so I have a junior. And I was going to do 30 years in the Navy, but I suffered kidney stones 10 years in. When they pushed me out with the kidney stones, medical discharge, I was sitting around Hawaii waiting on my discharge papers when I started hanging out with Hawaiians and started singing karaoke music. That's when Bruno Mars' father, Peter Hernandez, walked in and saw me singing and said, hey, I got a doo-wop group from Brooklyn called the Love Notes. We play in Waikiki 7 nights a week. Come join our group and be our first tenor. That started me in show business. Bruno was 6 years old at the time, playing Baby Elvis in the show. And that's when that's when my road to finding out who Jackie Wilson was started. Because once I started working for the for the Love Notes show with Peter Hernandez, people started yelling from the audience, you look like Jackie Wilson. Then Paul Revere of Paul Revere and the Raiders walked in to see Bruno, and he came to me and said, what are you doing singing backup when you should be a front singer? You look and sound just like Jackie. And Jackie was a friend of mine. So it's a long story, but I'm trying to make it short.
That is a long story, and I really appreciate you sharing it. Did you ever get to meet your dad?
No, he passed away long before he or I both knew of each other. And I started meeting the family and went through the DNA process, and here I am. And so
we're glad you're here.
I basically took the mantle of keeping Jackie Wilson music alive as one of my main goals. I got a lot of goals in this life, but that was one of them. Keeping his music alive, keeping his knowledge, the knowledge of him and his ways and his pioneering ways of getting the music out there and getting started, the way he endured what he went through, being an entertainer in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, and coming in, going in back doors and people spitting on you. But then when you walk on the stage, they love you. He couldn't eat at a restaurant. But then again, as soon as he stepped on stage, he was the king of the world. I said, them living in those parallel worlds at the same time, to me, they were heroes. And I look at Jackie Wilson as a hero, so I'm really happy and proud to be able to carry his music.
Well, we're really glad that Lynn Orman, our music producer for this show, turned us on to you. And the reason is you're coming to town.
Yes,
and
sir.
Why don't you tell us, there's 2 dates, and I'm going to make one of them one way or another.
Okay,
so I'll get to meet you in person. But you want to tell us what you got coming up?
December the 2nd, The Hidden Gem. Get your tickets online at evitebright.com. And then December the 3rd at The Venue in Aurora. This is my introduction to Chicago. Even though I've played there before, people that I was in different shows and production shows. This time, I'm coming to Chicago as Bobby Wilson, the star. And I want to build my own audience and carry my message of love you one another as you love yourself, and listen to the music and enjoy the music of Jackie Wilson. That's the message I'm carrying.
We're going to do that. So, one of the things that you and I were just talking before you came on, and you said you liked some of the discussion we were having with the previous guest, my buddy Mike Klonksy. Right. And I try to bring him out to meet you too. But you said you liked a lot of what we were talking about. I'm wondering what it's like for you out there as a performer these days, who gets people really responding to you. Do you care to share any of your thoughts and hopes for the future?
Well, I know. I feel like I ask God to allow me to be a beacon of light, to let his light shine through me when I'm on stage. It's not about me, but about his light healing everybody in the audience. And I try to put out, I don't try. I put out my message to love one another as you love yourself, and that we're all Republicans, Democrats, and independents, but we're all one world and one people. Whether we like it or not, we got to learn to get along with each other and live with each other and prosper in this world, because it's the only world we got. So that's the message I carry in my shows. And then I get everybody on their feet and I get them all singing and dancing along, just like my dad and the Temptations and the Miracles used to do. They're going to the theaters and the room is divided. Half is black, half is white, and there's a rope straight down the middle. And as Otis Williams of the Temptations told me, they start singing and then pushing the message of love. And next thing you know, the people break down the rope and they're singing and dancing with each other. And,
that's the truth.
And that's my message, to love one another. And this division that we have created in this world only hurts us. A house divided cannot stand. We got to listen to that. That's why we were called the United States, because we are united. But if we divide ourselves with all these different categories and we attack each other, we won't survive. Nobody wins when we attack each other. I mean, come on, let's get it with the black and white story. No, America took a really big blow with the black and white story. Instead of being the number one leading nation in the world, we're not. We are not the number one leading nation in the world no more. And whether we can fool ourselves and say, God bless America, but we're blowing smoke up our own asses. We're not. We gotta become the number one educated country. We got to become the number one industrialized country. But more than all of that, we got to become the number one united country. And we're not. As long as we keep fighting each other and being divisive, all it's going to do is push us down the line. And the next thing you know, those who were first will be last, and those who are last will be first.
This is good.
Yeah. So we got to be careful.
You're good, man. We're going to go on out now, but I want to ask you one last question. First of all, I'm going to tell everyone you're going to be once again at the Hidden Gem in Sauk Village on December 2nd, and at the venue in Aurora on December 3rd. Absolutely. Tell us about your band.
The band, we got Bill Robinson, my father's music director. He's actually, I'm lucky to have him. He's going to be directing my band along with the Snap Band. Also have a local girl from there named Miss Tammy Savoy as my opening act. She, if you remember Ruth Brown, you're going to love her.
I saw her at the Brooklyn Paramount.
Yeah, you're going to love this girl. You're going to love this girl. She has the spirit, and the everything about her is 1950s, 60s. And she brings back the authentic sound of Ruth Brown without trying. Well, it's in her. So anyway, I love her to death and her family, and she's part of the show. And we're gonna do all Jackie's hits, Whispers Getting Louder, Dogging Around, Baby Workout, Reed Petite, You Got Me Walking, just to name a few. Lonely Teardrops, of course, To Be Loved, and all your favorites. And just have a good time. And some of my dad's friends, like Sam Cooke, Otis Redding, it's going to be a dance party, a soul dance party. But I've been blessed. I don't know if you knew, but my father was able to impersonate voices. He could impersonate Ray Charles and Sammy Davis Jr. very easily. And I picked up that trait. So I'm going to bring some of those voices in the show.
Well, you're a hell of a guy, and I'm really looking forward to shaking your hand in person.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Bobby Wilson.
I'll see you soon.
You will see me. Okay, you are listening or watching the Live from the Heartland show out of Chicago, and we're going to take a short musical break. We're going to hear something from Bobby Wilson, and we'll be right back with our final guest for this edition of the Live from the Heartland show. Stay tuned here on the left end of your dial. Welcome back to Live from the Heartland for the week of November 26th. It's been a good show so far. We're going to take it out with another good segment. Got an old friend of mine, Erik Graff. I used to know him when I ran the Heartland Cafe. He was involved with the Socialist Party, as I believe. He gave the Heartland a beautiful blackboard from somewhere. I don't know, but we used to use it to write on back in the office and make plans. And most recently, I ran into Erik when I was over riding around. I saw this bookstore. I think Penny Rosemont had told me about it. It was Heirloom, and Katie Hogan, who sometimes appears on this show, and I stopped in, and Erik gave us a tour, and we said, you should come on the radio. So here you are, Erik, and good morning to you.
Good to see you, Michael. I first saw you in the 60s when you were with when you founded Rising Up Angry.
Uh-huh. So
and
we go way
both
back.
In the SDS together.
Got it.
Yeah. Well, it's good to have you on. Tell us a little bit about Heirloom Books. I know it was founded by Chelsea Rectanis. Is that how you say it?
Yeah.
And she was a Northwestern graduate, talented writer, and really wanted to set up a community and it ends in this bookstore. Tell us the story.
Back in March of 2017, Martin Steinfels told me that it looked like a new used bookstore was coming to the neighborhood, that being Edgewater. We walked over and Chelsea was just beginning to set up this place. She didn't have very many books or bookshelves. I felt sorry for her, so I started bringing her bookshelves and books and began volunteering at the shop. I worked here with her more than full time until her death 2 years ago this last August, at which time her family, her father was proprietor of the shop, asked me if I could try to keep it open. And with help from my brother, Eric Badger, we've done so by creating ourselves as a not-for-profit. We're still waiting for tax exemption from the feds, and all volunteer operation. We're a used bookstore primarily. Profits go to support 3 scholarship programs we've set up.
What kind of scholarship programs?
One scholarship is for Sullivan High School, the public high school in Rogers Park. It's done through the Friends of Sullivan High School. As you may know, Sullivan High School is sometimes popularly known as Immigrant High because it's the North Side school for immigrant kids.
It's a good school. It's a great school.
Yes, my father went there. My grandmother went to Sen. In any case, I volunteered there for about a year on the side, working here. They donated lots of books, became friends with Chad, the principal at that time. And the scholarship is to take one of those kids chosen by the school and by the Friends of Sullivan and paying for them to go to college or to begin going to college. We don't have that much money.
I was going to say.
The other scholarship is for a similar kid, someone graduating from high school who's poor with ability to benefit, to take a course at the great book school, Shimer College, which is a division of North Central down in Naperville. And the third scholarship is a woodcraft scholarship, whereby we pay the tuition and fees and all the supplies for someone to make a bookshelf for the bookstore and then use the extra time to do whatever they want. And we've had 2 women working through the Park District on that and at a private woodworking studio.
So the bookstore has really grown. Heirloom Books has really grown from not having a lot of bookshelves, not having a lot of books, to now where, it's wall to wall,
Yes.
floor to ceiling.
2 floors.
Where do you get most of the books from? Are they donated or do you buy books?
We don't buy any books. The books are from Chelsea's house, they're from my house, and they're donations. We get donations every week. The books that are donated to us, if we can't use them, we put them in book boxes around the neighborhood so we don't waste them. The only things I'd throw out would be perhaps Reader's Digest condensed books.
Well, let me ask you, do you have any old copies of B. Traven books in there?
Currently, we have had Traven. I'd have to look to see if we have any.
I had a whole set. Mostly they were Lawrence Hill books, Progressive Press, which has evolved, I think, into Chicago Review Press. But it was originally from the East Coast. And I had one book, I think The Bridge in the Jungle, or a Bridge, that I loaned to somebody and they lost it. So my little complete set of B. Traven books is gone. So keep me in mind if you ever come across it.
Sure, remind me and I'll look for you.
Do you have a special, any specialization, any books that stand out, or any sections of or categories of books, like photo books or things?
The most popular author is probably Karl Marx, followed by Kurt Vonnegut and Philip.
Is that because you had a lot of Karl Marx in your collection?
I haven't given those away. It's just that's what's popular with the kids. We're between 3 universities.
Yeah.
And so we get lots of students and faculty members who come here, and that's what the kids want to read. So those are our most popular categories, probably science fiction and fantasy.
Well, I think that's a wonderful thing to hear, that kids are reading Karl Marx.
Yes.
And
anarchist literature is very popular as well.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of anarchists out there. Do you get any right-wingers coming in, or is it all progressive types?
No, there's a right-winger who comes in every week or 2 and argues with me.
And I bet you're good at arguing. I know that.
Well, he's polylingual, so he buys foreign language. We have a large foreign language section. He buys mostly books in German and Spanish.
Erik Graff, do you do special events over there? Do you have any Do you have any readings, poetry, whatever? Talk about some of the things that you do.
Last Sunday, we had a concert with 3 performers next door at what used to be the Helix Cafe, which is now basically a meeting place and an office place. They no longer run a cafe there. We have authors events, book signings, and readings in the bookstore. Sometimes when we need more space, we use the space at Helix because they have more floor space than we do. We're open. We have an events coordinator, Zandra, and if someone's interested in having a book signing or something like that, I'll put them in contact with her and she can make arrangements for them to have some time and space.
Erik, do you have any?
Don't charge anything.
That's nice. Do you have any events coming up you want to share?
I think Taylor Immel is having another writing workshop coming up, but I'm not sure about the date of it. There are a number of writers or publicists who want to do book signings who I've put in contact with Sandra, but I haven't heard anything about that. We just had that event next door, the concert. We're going to have a large event where we give our check to Shimer College, which will be once the weather gets nice in the spring. And we'll be doing it again for Sullivan. We had an event this fall at Archie's for Sullivan, where we have the concert outdoors at Archie's Cafe. And there since they have outdoor seating, we can accommodate, hundreds of people.
I'd heard the customers coming in or leaving. The bell is ringing. That's nice.
There are customers here going back and forth.
Let me ask you, Erik, how you got interested in books, and in you clearly have a love of books. Do you remember when that started? Your first book? I mean, my first book, I still have it, Michael the Colt, that my mom gave me.
Oh, okay. Well, I was fortunate in that my family usually didn't have a television.
Oh, too bad. Or good.
It was good that we didn't have a television. Occasionally, we'd be given a portable black and white by my grandparents or something, but I went through a good deal of childhood with no TV. And my brother wasn't born until 8 years after me, so I had 8 years as an only child, and there wasn't much to do except to read. So I did. And recently I found in the bottom of a box in my basement underneath some of my artwork from grade school, book reviews I'd written in 2nd grade for books like Albert Schweitzer and His Animals, Mr. Popper's Penguins, and so on, all of which I put in Goodreads.
Do you ever think about putting out a little book of your early kid book reviews?
I published them in Goodreads.
Good. So do you have a website over there?
Oh yeah, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, we're on TikTok, we have our own website. We have quite a presence on the web.
So if people go to
Heirloom Books, we have a YouTube page because we're doing a series of lectures about the great books by Jeff Hegelson, who's a retired university professor. And we've also been putting a lot of our special events on our YouTube page as well.
Erik, what is your take on the status and the state of bookstores in general, and maybe used bookstores in particular?
Okay, that's significant. Amazon, of course, really hurt independent bookstores. Fortunately, a little more than 2 years ago, an organization called bookshop.com was set up to compete with Amazon and to support independent bookstores, which they do by sharing 30% of their profits of any sale with the bookstore that the customer chooses. There are about 4,000 bookstores in both countries to choose from. We're one of them, and it's been a godsend. It's worth, I would not be surprised if we made close to $10,000 from that this year.
Very good.
Mm-hmm.
Well, is there anything else you would like to share with the masses who will be tuning in and listening or viewing this show?
Well, it would be nice if people came to visit. We're in a remote location. We're across from the Centro Romero near the corner of Thome and Clark, between Devon and Granville. A lot of our customers are people getting their car fixed because there's like 4 auto shops within 2
There's a lot of
areas.
auto shops. Besides some great old signage on the ones across the street.
We particularly want Loyola students to find out we're here because many of them don't venture far from their university campus.
Well, after this show goes on, I'm sure they're going to be knocking on your door.
I hope so.
Well, Erik, I want to thank you for coming on, and I will stop by more regularly. I go by pretty regularly, and I keep thinking about we should get together and we should do this, and we have done it. And then whenever you have something you really want to share, an event or something, please let us know, and we'll help promote it on here.
We might be able to post some of your work on our walls if you like.
Oh, that'll be great too. I would love to. I'll share with you each week what we got going on. I've got a few books out myself, which maybe I'll bring by.
If you bring me a signed copy, I'll put it with our signed books, all of which are also on a searchable database.
All right. Well, I'll be seeing you real soon, and you have a good Thanksgiving, which is the day after we record this, and 2 days before it goes wild throughout the universe.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. Say hi to Katie for me.
I will. Thank you very much, Erik.
Bye-bye.
You are listening to the Live from the Heartland show, and we're going to go out now because we've had almost a full hour. I want to thank our guests today. We had Michael Klonksy, we had Bobby Wilson, and we had Erik Graff. And we are really indebted always to WLUW 88.7, our home base. We want to thank everyone over there, including Josie Stoller, the program director. I want to thank Katie Hogan, Lynn Orman Weiss, Tom Clark, Emilio Davis, Hal James for helping to make this show possible. At the end of each show, we say, we encourage you to do good in the world because the world needs all the good that we do, that I do, that you do, that Erik does, that Hal does. We've got a lot of work ahead of us. It's a beautiful world. It's a world that's struggling and in trouble, and it's really up to us to play a part while we can. So I'll see you next week. I hope you had a great Thanksgiving, and we'll be back with more Live from the Heartland here on the left end of your dial or anywhere else you can get it. And we're everywhere now. All power to the people.